December 1989. Hong Kong was shrouded in a thick, wet mist, the city's skyline blurred by relentless rain as it prepared to close out a turbulent decade. Yet in a quiet corner of the New Territories within the Tai Po district, a story was beginning to unfold, one that would leave even the most cynical urbanites chilled to the bone. It all started at Ka Tuen Ki, a humble little tea restaurant tucked away in a row of shops. Its windows were perpetually fogged over from the steam of beef chow fun and honey-glazed char siu rice. On one particularly bleak evening, the restaurant received an unusual phone call. The voice on the other end sounded distant and crackly, as if it were transmitted from deep underground. But the order was precise: a feast for 4, including their best beef chow fun, plates of honey-glazed char siu, and several side dishes that seemed a bit too extravagant for a casual takeout order. The address provided was Hei Ha Villa, a mid-range apartment complex that locals knew well but often spoke of in hushed tones after dark. The shift manager took down the details, slightly surprised by the meticulous nature of the request, and handed the slip to the delivery boy, a young man named Chang. As Chang set off, the city's narrow, rain-slicked streets stretched out before him like silent sentinels. He pulled his scooter up to Hei Ha Villa. The building loomed over him, dark and seemingly devoid of life. The rain fell in sheets, and not a single light flickered from the windows. Only a dim hallway bulb flickered at the entrance, casting long, grotesque shadows that swayed as if guarding a secret. Chang hesitated, glancing back at his clipboard, but pushed through his unease. He knocked on the door, the sound echoing strangely against the concrete walls. For a moment, there was only silence. He raised his hand to knock again, harder this time, but just as his knuckles were about to hit the wood, the door creaked open just a fraction. From the darkness, a hand reached out, a pale, spindly hand that seemed to hover in the pitch-black void of the apartment. It held several Hong Kong dollar bills, trembling slightly as if weak or unnaturally cold. A voice followed, deep and resonant with a metallic ring. "Leave the food at the door."
Chang muttered a polite acknowledgement, the hair on the back of his neck standing up as he carefully placed the bags on the welcome mat. He took the cash, his eyes fixed on that strange, ghostly hand as it retreated into the gloom. The door clicked shut before he could even blink. Heart hammering, Chang hurried down the hallway and sped away, desperate to put the building behind him. Back at the restaurant, he brushed off the unsettling encounter, telling himself it was just a late hour and the rain playing tricks on his mind. That night, after the last customers had shuffled out and the metal shutters were rolled down, the owner sat to count the day's earnings. As he thumbed through the bills, he felt a texture that didn't belong, something crispier and lighter. To his horror, sandwiched between the legitimate Hong Kong dollars were hell banknotes, the paper money burned as offerings to the deceased. His hands froze. Sensing his distress, the staff crowded around, their whispers of alarm filling the small kitchen. But the owner shook it off, assuming it was a cruel prank or a bizarre mistake made in the rush of business. However, the question remained: who would sneak funeral money into a payment, and why? The next night, it happened again. Another call, another order for the same lavish meal at the same address. This time, a cold knot formed in the owner's stomach. He suspected an elaborate prank. Determined to catch the culprit, he sent Chang again, but told him to pay close attention. Once more, Chang arrived at Hei Ha Villa. The building stood still as if frozen in time. Once more, the door cracked open, the pale hand emerged, and the voice vibrated from the dark, instructing him to leave the food. The money was exchanged without incident, but when they tallied the drawer back at the shop, another stack of hell money was hidden in the pile. Livid and bewildered, the owner decided he would deliver the next order himself. He prepared the meal the following evening, waiting with a tension he couldn't shake, a feeling like an invisible thread was pulling him toward Hea Villa. When the call came as expected, he didn't waste a second. He hopped on his scooter, clutching the thermal bags as he navigated the fog-choked streets. Arriving at the unit, he scanned the facade of the building, hoping to see a shadow move behind a curtain, but there was nothing, just a heavy, oppressive silence. He knocked, and as if on cue, the door opened just enough to reveal a blurred figure. This time, he watched the hand intently as it passed him the cash, looking for any clue of the prankster's identity. The hand shook slightly, and he noticed a faint discoloration around the fingertips, a waxy, yellowish hue that made him shiver. Gripping the money, he watched the figure recede. Before leaving, he tried to peer through the narrow gap into the apartment, but all he saw was an impenetrable blackness, as if something inside were actively swallowing the light. Back at the restaurant, he set the money aside, separate from the other bills. But when he checked the stack later, his worst fears were realized. The cash from that delivery had inexplicably transformed into hell banknotes. Driven by a mounting sense of dread, the owner contacted the police, telling a story he knew sounded ridiculous. To his surprise, the officers listened intently and agreed to investigate, if only to quiet the man's fears. When the police arrived at Hea Villa, the building felt even more foreboding. They knocked and announced themselves, but there was no answer. Deciding to force entry, they broke the door down and were immediately hit by a wave of decay, a stench so foul it forced them back into the hallway. Inside the apartment was a scene of silent horror. A mahjong table sat in the center of the room, and around it were 4 male bodies slumped in their chairs, their skin waxy and yellow, their eyes open in a sightless stare. Mahjong tiles were scattered across the table, frozen mid-game as if the players had simply drifted off to sleep. There were no signs of a struggle or foul play. However, a closer look revealed a tragic truth. The men had died of carbon monoxide poisoning, victims of a makeshift charcoal stove that had slowly filled the room with invisible death. Forensics determined the men had been dead for nearly a week, yet neighbors reported hearing the distinct clack-clack of mahjong tiles and the low murmur of voices as recently as the night before. Stranger still, the medical examiner found fresh food in their stomachs, the very same beef chow fun and char siu rice they had supposedly ordered and eaten days after they had passed away. The case left the police completely stumped. When the police checked the hell banknotes recovered from the restaurant, they found fingerprints on the paper, fingerprints belonging to the dead men. As the story hit the tabloids, rumors swept through Hong Kong. Some speculated they were lingering souls trapped by unfinished business, unaware they had even died. Others believed it was a case of hungry ghosts, anchored to the apartment by dark forces, forced to replay their final moments and reaching back into the world of the living for one last taste of the life they once knew. Since that fateful December night, the mystery of the ghostly delivery at Hea Villa has become a legendary urban myth. They say that on quiet nights, the sound of mahjong tiles can still be heard echoing from the abandoned unit, as the spirits of those 4 young men continue their eternal game, waiting for a meal that will never truly satisfy an undying hunger.